Isla was 19 years old. She had never been kissed, never been touched, never belonged to anyone. And yet, on that night, she would be given away. The marriage contract had already been signed when she truly understood what was happening. Before the story begins, the narrator invites the audience to pause, to comment where they are watching from, to subscribe, activate notifications, and leave a like. Because what follows is not a tale that fades with time. It is the kind of story that stays heavy long after the video ends. So take a deep breath, because what comes next is not romance. It is heartbreak. That morning, Ayla stood in the kitchen of her childhood home, still wearing her sleep clothes, when her mother said the words that split her life in two. "It's the only way to save the vineyard." Ayla laughed at first. She thought it was a cruel joke, badly told. But when she turned to her father, his face was pale, rigid, defeated. There was no humor in his eyes, only surrender. The proposal was real, official, and it carried a price no daughter should ever be asked to pay. A 75-year-old billionaire sheikh had offered to clear every debt the family carried, to rescue the vineyard from auction, to protect their name, their land, their future. In exchange, he wanted a wife, not an actress, not a model, but a young woman from a traditional European family, educated, discreet, untouched. "She fits exactly what he's looking for," the lawyer said calmly, sliding a thick folder across the table. "He wants someone like you." The paper was beautiful. Gold seals, official stamps, clauses written in French and Arabic. But Ayla didn't need to read a single line to understand the truth hidden between them. She was being exchanged, for money, for land, for survival. For days, she resisted. She screamed, she cried. She locked herself in her room and threatened to run away. But everything had already been decided. "It's a symbolic marriage," her father insisted, avoiding her eyes. "He's an old man, Ayla. He probably just wants company." She wanted to believe that. She needed to believe that. The agreement was finalized by international lawyers, mediated by representatives from Morocco. The family received immediate financial protection. The debts were frozen. The vineyard was removed from the auction list, and Ayla lost her freedom. The flight to Marrakesh was scheduled for the following Saturday. She traveled alone. The airplane was quiet, almost empty, and the silence felt louder than any noise. She didn't know if she was being taken toward a new life, or toward the end of her own. The fear didn't come from turbulence or unfamiliar places. It came from the silence of the contract, from the silence of her parents, from the silence inside her chest, the silence of someone who had already said yes without ever wanting to. When she arrived in Morocco, everything was perfect. A black armored car waited on the runway. The driver spoke little. A luxury hotel had been reserved exclusively for her, but none of it felt like a gift. It felt like preparation. From the car window, Ayla watched the city move, children running through narrow streets, colorful tents, palm trees bending in the warm wind. And she thought, how does the world keep spinning so lightly, while I'm about to marry a man older than my grandfather? On the night before the ceremony, already inside the sheikh's palace, one of the assistants smiled politely and said, "He is very eager to finally meet you, madam." Ayla froze. "Meet me?" she whispered. "What do you mean?" The assistant tilted her head slightly. "The marriage will be consummated, of course." The room seemed to shrink. Ayla had assumed, without anyone ever confirming, that the marriage would remain formal, that it would be a title, a promise, a distance. But no one had guaranteed that. Not her father, not the lawyers, not the contract. That night, alone in a room far too large, she finally allowed the thought to surface in full. I may have to lie with him, and no one will come to save me. On the morning of the wedding, the palace was silent. Not peaceful, controlled. Ayla hadn't slept. She sat on the edge of the bed as assistants entered with rehearsed smiles, white dresses folded over their arms. "Today is your special day, Mrs. Ayla." Special. She almost laughed, almost screamed. Getting dressed took nearly an hour, pure silk, pearls resting against her throat. a soft perfume placed carefully at the nape of her neck. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked like a bride, but she felt like a product, carefully wrapped for delivery. The ceremony took place in the main hall. There were few guests, men in flawless suits, neutral expressions, diplomats, lawyers, ambassadors. No one from her family, no one to hold her hand, no one to look at her as a daughter, as a human being. At the center of the room stood Tariq ibn Hashid, the groom, 75 years old, dressed in traditional garments, his posture firm, his presence imposing. His eyes lit up when he saw her. There was no tenderness in that look, only satisfaction. He had what he wanted, a young, untouched bride. The others before her had aged. They no longer interested him. Tariq wanted youth, obedience, novelty. Ayla swallowed hard as the formalities were spoken in Arabic and French. She answered only when required. Signed papers she no longer read, accepted the ring, the blessing, the title. She was officially married. At the end of the ceremony, the sheikh approached, bent slightly, and kissed her hand. She didn't move, didn't blink. "You are even more beautiful than they promised," he said softly, smiling. Her stomach turned. Later, as evening fell, Ayla was led through a narrow corridor. Heavy doors, thick curtains, a silent inner garden. The servant stopped before a golden door. "This is your wing, Mrs. Ayla." "And the sheikh?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "He will come later, as tradition dictates." The door closed. Alone in the luxurious room, Ayla lay on a bed she had not chosen, her heart pounding too loudly for sleep. Only one thought echoed in her mind. Is it really going to happen tonight? The room was vast, cold, beautiful in a way that felt empty. Golden furniture, heavy curtains, a large mirror facing the bed. Everything seemed designed to impress, or intimidate. Ayla sat at the edge of the mattress, hands trembling on her knees, feet cold against the floor. She wanted to run, but there was nowhere left to go. When the door finally opened, two maids entered quietly, eyes lowered. "You must bathe and wear what has been prepared for you tonight," one of them said. Ayla didn't respond, didn't move. They prepared the bath and placed a single delicate garment where she could see it. It was not a nightgown. It was a surrender. "The sheikh will arrive shortly," the woman added without emotion. "He prefers everything to be as tradition requires." Tradition. Ayla bathed as if walking toward an altar. She dressed in the thin fabric that revealed far too much, leaving nothing to imagination. When she returned to the bed, there was no sheet to hide behind, no air enough to breathe. Minutes later, the sound of the door handle turning echoed through the room. Her body tensed. Tariq entered slowly. The scent of his perfume filled the space as his eyes fixed on her, not with love, but with ownership. He closed the door behind him and walked toward the bed. Ayla swallowed hard. Her hands trembled as she loosened the thin ties of the fabric. The silk slid slowly from her shoulders and fell onto the bed like something already abandoned. She stood there exposed, her eyes fixed on the floor, her body rigid with fear. "Lie down," Tariq ordered, his voice cold and absolute. "Legs open, as a wife should be on her first night, and do not make me repeat myself." Ayla climbed onto the bed slowly. She obeyed. She turned her face toward the wall, as if distance could protect her. Her heart raced wildly, pounding so hard it hurt. Tariq watched her in silence. His chest rose heavily, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. He climbed onto the bed with deliberate slowness, the mattress sinking under his weight as he moved closer. Then he spoke. "I am going to tell you exactly what will happen," he said calmly. Ayla held her breath. "It will hurt. You will not move. You will not resist. You will not scream." He paused. "If you must, bite the sheets. But once I begin, I will not stop." A tear slipped silently from the corner of Ayla's eye. She did not turn her face. She did not blink. But every muscle in her body trembled. Tariq leaned closer, his voice now low, heavy with control and desire. "You will let it happen. he whispered near her ear. You will open yourself without struggle, without hesitation. You were made for this, and you will endure it. Ayla did not answer. Her body went cold. Her gaze drifted to the ceiling, unfocused, as if her soul had already fled somewhere far away. Tarek positioned himself between her legs. He lowered his body, pressed his face briefly against her neck, inhaled the scent of her skin, and murmured hoarsely, "Let us get this over with. I have waited long enough to claim what is mine." Then, just before he made any further movement, he froze. His breathing faltered. His eyes widened, then rolled upward as if something inside him had suddenly shut down. His body stiffened for a single second, and then collapsed. Dead weight, unresponsive. He fell heavily against Ayla, his head pressing into her shoulder, his arm draped across her abdomen. The warmth of his breath faded. "Something's wrong," Tarek whispered faintly. Then nothing. Ayla remained frozen, unable to process what had happened. The weight of his body crushed the air from her lungs. She tried to push him away, panic rising, but he was too heavy. She managed to shift him only slightly. She was suffocating, from the contact, from the terror, from the moment itself. "Help!" she cried, using what little air she had left. "Help, please!" The door burst open. Servants rushed in, shouting. 2 guards followed immediately. One of them pulled the Sheikh's body away with force. Another covered Ayla with a sheet. The room descended into chaos. Doctors were called. The corridor filled with commands shouted in Arabic. Hurried footsteps, urgent voices. Ayla was taken to another room, still wrapped in the sheet, pale and shaking. She did not cry. She did not speak. She felt only a brutal emptiness, as if the world itself had gone dark inside her. Hours later, the truth reached her. Tariq ibn Hashid had suffered a massive stroke, severe, irreversible. He was placed on life support. He did not regain consciousness. He never would. For the next 3 months, Ayla remained in the palace. She was not allowed to leave. She had no contact with the outside world. It was as if she still belonged to him, even while he lay unconscious. Then, one suffocating morning, a maid entered her room and said simply, "The Sheikh passed away last night." On the table beside her bed lay an envelope. Inside was his will. Ayla, the wife he had never truly possessed, had been named a partial heir. No one ever spoke of what happened that night, and Ayla never told anyone, because that was the night that never happened. The funeral was discreet, no cameras, no speeches, a brief ceremony surrounded by security and silence. Ayla was not allowed to attend, even as a widow, even as his legal wife. The following day, the Sheikh's lawyer arrived at the palace. Dark suit, briefcase in hand, an unreadable expression. "The will was opened this morning," he said without ceremony. "And your name is included." Ayla did not react. She did not know whether this was a reward or a curse. The prenuptial clause was clear. The marriage had to be consummated for any inheritance rights to be valid. But no one could prove what had or had not happened that night, and Tariq had never spoken of it. He had chosen silence, a silence that, to some, said everything. To others, nothing at all. What no one expected was what followed. In secret, Tariq had included a personal testamentary clause, one that granted Ayla part of his fortune, properties, shares, and a lifetime allowance, all within the limits of Moroccan succession law. It was a calculated decision, deliberate, legal. Was it a gift or a final act of control? Perhaps his way of saying, "You will carry my name, with or without love, with or without desire, and the world will know it." For the Sheikh's children, it was an insult. That very day, attacks began. Leaks to the press. Articles questioning Ayla's origins, rumors of manipulation, seduction, even witchcraft. They painted her as an opportunist, a young woman who had deceived a powerful old man to claim his wealth. "The Spanish girl who became a millionaire widow in less than 3 months," the headlines read. Ayla remained silent. She gave no interviews. She made no public appearances. It did not stop her image from becoming a target. The family initiated legal action, seeking to annul the will. They claimed the sheikh had been ill, vulnerable, manipulated, that Ayla had taken advantage of a weakened man. And above all, they argued that the marriage had never been consummated. "This inheritance is a disgrace," one of the older daughters declared on a Dubai news channel. "That woman stole what was ours." But nothing caused more tension than the news that arrived 2 weeks later. Zarir was returning, the youngest son, educated in international law in London, absent for more than 5 years, quiet, brilliant, dangerous. "He will not rest until he clears his father's name," people said. Ayla heard the report on television, sitting alone on a sofa with the curtains drawn, the world collapsing quietly outside. She knew then, what was coming would not be just a legal battle. It would be personal, and she was the target. Time passed. 7 years later, Ayla disappeared, not from official records, but from life itself. She now lived in the south of Spain, in an old house nestled among the hills of Cádiz. White walls, heavy curtains, a simple enclosed garden. Every morning she woke at 6, drank tea, read, walked in silence. No parties, no public appearances, no interviews. The inheritance remained sealed under strict confidentiality. The courts closed the case for lack of evidence of manipulation, but her name was never cleared. Some said she was cold. Others said she was a survivor who learned too quickly. No one truly knew what happened that night, and Ayla never spoke. Not about the marriage, not about the death, not about the will. Ayla hired a small team of private security, discreet men, loyal, paid not only to protect her from the press, but from curiosity, speculation, and from her own past. She lived like someone haunted by something invisible. Her eyes were always alert, her soul permanently tired. Some days passed without her speaking to anyone at all. She tended the garden, trimmed the lavender, or sat quietly on the porch, watching the wind move through the olive trees. She tried to forget, but the body remembers. Sometimes, without warning, her hands trembled in the dark. Sometimes her chest tightened for no reason she could name. And even after all those years, peace never truly arrived. Because Ayla knew one thing with certainty: stories like hers never end in silence. They only fall asleep for a while, and that time was over. He arrived quietly. Zarir ibn Hashid, Tariq's legitimate son, 35 years old, cold presence, dark eyes, a natural elegance that did not seek attention. Though born of desert blood, he had been shaped elsewhere. A degree in international law from London, fluent in 5 languages, cultured, controlled. For 7 years he had watched from a distance. He had not appeared when his father collapsed, not when he died, not when the inheritance was read, but something never settled inside him. Too many unanswered questions. A woman hidden in the interior of Spain, untouched, unreachable, and wealthy. Zarir had never accepted that story. A powerful man dying on his wedding night with a 19-year-old virgin, and she walking away with part of the fortune. It did not sit right. On a clear morning, he set foot in Cádiz for the first time. He rented a black car and drove alone along the road that cut through the vineyards. Southern Spain looked calm on the outside. Inside him, everything was suspicion. He wore a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, tailored dark trousers, and a simple watch. Expensive, but understated. There was no smile on his face, only focus. He parked in front of Ayla's white house, closed gate, cameras on both sides. A guard watched him carefully from a distance. Zarir waited with the window down, one arm resting on the steering wheel. "Can I help you?" the guard asked, his tone firm. "I'm here to speak with Mrs. Ayla," Zarir replied, his accent precise, his voice calm. "She doesn't receive visitors." "Zarir ibn Hashid." The guard swallowed. He didn't answer immediately. He made a quick phone call, then returned. "She will not receive you." Zarir nodded. He didn't argue, didn't insist. He reversed the car slowly and drove away, as if that outcome had always been part of the plan, because it was. He knew he would not reach her with a simple visit. He knew she was protected, and he knew that if he wanted answers, he would have to enter another way. That night, Ayla didn't sleep. There was something in the air, a strange disturbance, a sensation at the gate, the unsettling certainty that someone was nearby, and it wasn't a journalist. The next day, Zarir checked into a small inn 3 kilometers away, using a false name. He began to observe. He learned where Ayla bought her bread, what time the security guard changed shifts, how many times a week she walked behind the house, and the most curious detail of all, she lived alone, absolutely alone. In his room at the inn, Zarir documented everything, photos, schedules, patterns, not out of obsession, out of strategy. He wanted to understand what kind of woman she was. She seemed untouchable, yet her gaze was empty. She looked secure, yet she never left. Was she guilty? Or was that what he wanted to believe? For the first time, Zarir hesitated. There was something in her face, in the way she held her teacup with both hands, in how she avoided meeting any man's eyes, in how her shoulders were always slightly tense, that did not match the image of an opportunist. On the 4th day, he saw her at the market, distracted as she selected apples. He almost approached her, almost, but he didn't, because he sensed it. She wasn't just an enigma, she was a minefield, and one wrong step would make everything explode. He stayed. After being rejected at the gate, Zarir remained nearby, silent, strategic. He began frequenting the same places, the same bakery, the same grocery store, the same trail she walked in the late afternoons. Ayla noticed. She felt the weight of his gaze even when he pretended not to look. But she said nothing. Not to her guards, not to her closest neighbor, not even to herself. She knew who he was, and she knew why he was there. In the 3rd week, Zarir knocked on the gate again, clean-shaven, impeccable. White shirt, sleeves rolled up, light gray blazer, polished shoes. "I didn't come for revenge," he said when the guard stopped him. Ayla heard his voice from upstairs. She didn't come down. "I just want to talk," he insisted. 10 minutes. No cameras, no accusations. Silence. The guard hesitated. "I only want the truth," Zarir added. More silence. The gate closed slowly. Zarir didn't protest. He turned and left. But he returned the next day, and the next. Ayla began to wonder if he truly wanted answers, or if his presence alone was meant to destabilize her. That Saturday afternoon, she was in the garden, watering the plants. Zarir appeared on the other side of the fence. "Beautiful flowers," he said, gesturing with his chin. She ignored him, continued watering the lavender roots. "I just want to understand," he said calmly, "and you're the only one who can tell me." Ayla turned off the hose. She raised her eyes and looked at him for a few seconds. "What exactly do you want to know?" she asked. It was the first time she spoke to him. Zarir stepped closer to the fence, careful not to cross it. "Did you have any involvement?" he asked slowly. "You and my father?" Ayla didn't respond. Her expression didn't change. No anger, no surprise, only silence. "Did you touch him?" Zarir continued. "Or was it he who touched you?" She turned away and resumed watering the plants. Zarir stood there, breathing deeply, as if counting to 10 internally. "And the will?" he asked finally. "Was that your idea?" She dropped the hose. "Are you finished?" she asked quietly. "Not yet," he replied. "But for today, yes." He stepped back and left. The following week, he returned. This time he didn't speak to her. He left a basket at the door, fruit, mint tea, and an envelope with a card. "I don't want to threaten you. I want to understand what my father saw in you." Zarir Ayla didn't respond, but she didn't return the basket either. The days that followed were marked by brief encounters. A distant nod, a comment about the weather, a look that lingered longer than necessary. And with every movement Ayla made, Zarir saw something that unsettled him. She didn't seem cynical. She didn't seem cold. She seemed wounded. And that was harder to accept than any accusation. By chance, Zarir spent an afternoon handling legal matters in Seville. But his mind wasn't on the documents. He returned to the inn tense, restless, exhausted by the way Ayla escaped everything. Questions, explanations, even judgment. Always firm, always contained, untouchable. By accident, Zarir overheard a conversation in the hallway of the inn. The receptionist was speaking softly to one of the housekeepers. "She's strange, isn't she? I've never seen that woman smile." "Well, after what people say she lived through. What she lived through, or what never even happened." They laughed quietly. "Nothing happened. The old man died before. You know, they say she was never touched." Zarir stopped walking. The women noticed him instantly. "I'm sorry, sir. We didn't know." "Who said that?" Zarir asked calmly. "One of the nurses," the housekeeper replied, uneasy. "She helped prepare the body. She said he was untouched, as if nothing had happened at all." Zarir said nothing. He simply turned and walked away. The next morning he appeared at Ayla's gate earlier than usual. "I need to speak with her," he told the guard. This time, permission was granted. Ayla waited for him in the garden. She sat on a stone bench, a white shawl covering her legs, a cup of tea resting in her hands. Zarir approached with steady steps, but something about him had changed. There was no anger in his eyes now. There was something else, something darker. "Is it true," he asked without preamble, "that you never had anything with my father?" Ayla lifted the cup to her lips without breaking eye contact. "What difference would that make now?" she asked quietly. "It would make a great deal." "So no?" Zarir pressed, his brow tightening. "No," she said. "He touched me." Zarir's jaw clenched. "So you're saying the marriage was consummated?" "Is that what you want to hear?" she replied. "I want the truth." She stood up slowly, composed, and walked toward him until only a few steps separated them. "Yes," she said evenly. "The marriage was consummated. Isn't that what you came here to know?" Zarir stared at her. "Say it clearly," he demanded. She met his gaze. He was silent for several seconds before speaking again, his voice low, controlled, unsettling. "Then prove it." Ayla froze. Her eyes faltered for a fraction of a second, and Zarir saw it. The fear, the hesitation, the color rising along her neck. She wasn't good at lying. She was good at silence. "I don't have to prove anything," she said at last. "But you just said it happened." "And if it did," she replied, "it belongs to the past." Zarir stepped closer. She didn't move. "Because if it didn't," he whispered, "you would have no right to that inheritance." "You don't need to remind me," she said sharply. "I know exactly what's at stake." "Then why lie?" Ayla inhaled deeply, lifted her eyes to the sky for a moment, then answered in a voice that carried both pain and defense. "Because sometimes the truth doesn't protect anyone." Zarir fell silent. Her face remained firm, but her eyes were fractured. And in that instant, Zarir felt something he hadn't expected. It wasn't rage, it wasn't contempt, it was desire and guilt, because he was beginning to want to understand her, and he was also beginning to want her, and that burned. In the days that followed, Ayla pretended nothing had changed. She watered the plants at the same hour, prepared her tea at the same temperature, walked across the garden stones with the same measured steps. But everything inside her was sharper now, more alert, more tense. Zarir didn't appear for 3 days. No visits, no notes, no provocations. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt unsettled. On the 4th afternoon, he arrived without warning. He was dressed in black. A fitted shirt, no blazer, no formality. His eyes looked darker, his face more closed. She heard his presence from the terrace and descended slowly. "You came to demand another answer?" she asked as soon as he entered the garden. "I didn't come to demand," he said. "I came to return a question." She frowned. Zarir pulled an old newspaper clipping from his pocket and handed it to her. Spanish widow inherits Arab sheikh's fortune after mysterious wedding night. Was this leaked by you? He asked. Isla froze. She read the headline as if for the first time, though she had read it before, over and over, until it tasted like dried blood. No, she said. It wasn't me. It was convenient, he insisted. At the time, reinforcing the idea of a consummated night kept the will valid. It wasn't me, she repeated. But you benefited. Her silence hurt more than any scream. Zarir stepped closer. So that's it, he murmured. You lied, and you liked the lie. I survived, she replied, her eyes locked onto his. Liking had nothing to do with it. He let out a bitter half-laugh, not mockery, but frustration with himself. You're good at this, he said. At what? At saying nothing, and still driving everyone insane. She inhaled, turned, and started back toward the house. Ayla, he called. She stopped but didn't look at him. That's it? He asked. You survived? She turned back. And you? She asked quietly. Are you here for justice or curiosity? His expression darkened. Words failed him. Only the body remained. He stepped too close, their chests nearly touching. The heat of his breath filled the space between them. Ayla's heart raced. Don't, she whispered. Don't do this. What is this? He asked, not retreating. His hands hovered near her arms, almost touching. Almost. She held her breath. Then she stepped back. You should leave. Zarir stayed where he was, eyes fixed on her, pulse racing. You don't hate me, he said softly. Maybe I should, she answered. But she didn't say she did. She turned and went inside. Zarir remained alone in the garden as the sun began to set, his body burning with questions and something far more dangerous. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for anymore, but he knew where to find answers. The old office in Tangier. His father's private study had remained sealed for years. No one entered it, not even the lawyers. When Zarir finally stepped inside, the air smelled of aged leather, polished wood, and silence. Maps, books in Arabic, stacks of documents. Everything was in perfect order, and that disturbed him. After hours of searching, he found it. A false bottom drawer. Inside were contracts. The purchase of Ayla's family winery, signed through shell companies connected directly to Tarek. The realization hit him like a blow to the chest. Tarek had bought the winery long before its collapse. He had been a silent partner. He drained funds, destabilized exports, pressured creditors behind the scenes. It hadn't been an accident. It hadn't been bad business. It had been calculated. Zarir understood everything. His father had destroyed what Ayla had, so he could later save her. He had turned her ruin into the perfect condition for marriage, not out of love, but out of possession. Zarir sank into his father's chair, staring at the documents. Beside them lay another folder, photographs, emails, reports. Ayla at 17, at 18, at wine fairs, at home with her family, at university. She had been watched long before she knew she would be sold. She had been chosen, marked. Zarir's blood ran cold. Ayla was not an opportunist. She had never been one. She had been a target, a deliberate choice. And his father was not a sick old man who had died too soon, as everyone preferred to believe. He had been a predator, patient, calculating, fully aware of every step he took. That night, back at the guest house, Zarir did not sleep. Ayla's face returned to him in fragments, the way she avoided prolonged eye contact, the discipline in her posture, the silence she used like armor. Her answers were never dramatic, never pleading, always precise, restrained, almost sharp. And suddenly he understood. She had never lied. She had never tried to convince anyone. She had simply learned that silence was the only way to survive. And even then, she paid for it every single day. The following morning, Zarir asked one last question to one of his father's former lawyers, a man who had been around long enough to know when not to speak. Why didn't anyone ever question whether the marriage was consummated? The man hesitated, then answered quietly. Because no one dared, he said. To suggest otherwise would have been to imply that the sheikh was incapable. It would have humiliated his memory publicly. No one wanted to carry that scandal. Not the family, not the heirs. He paused, then added, almost apologetically, not even you. Zarir said nothing. So that was it. Ayla had not inherited because she was acknowledged as a wife. She had inherited because the entire world was too afraid to speak the truth. In the end, she hadn't gained anything. She had carried it. Zarir closed his eyes and took a slow, heavy breath. The man who had sworn to protect his father's honor now stood at a crossroads, preserve the myth, or free the woman his father had destroyed. And with every passing hour, it became harder to look at Ayla without realizing that, in some cruel way, she embodied everything his father had never been brave enough to be. Human, free, and quietly invincible. Zarir returned that evening without warning. No guards, no entourage, no armor in his expression. Ayla was already there, waiting, as if she had sensed his presence long before she heard the gate. She said nothing. She simply opened the door and let him in. The silence between them lasted over a minute, but inside their chests, everything screamed. Zarir approached slowly, careful not to invade her space, his voice low when he finally spoke. "I'm sorry," he said, "for everything." Ayla nodded. "Nothing more." "I'm not here to take anything from you," he added. "I know," she replied softly. He lifted his hand with hesitation and touched her face with the tips of his fingers. Her skin was warm, her cheeks faintly flushed. He traced the line of her jaw, the curve of her chin, and she did not pull away. Their eyes locked. There was fear, but there was also desire, and tension, and waiting. He slid his hand to the back of her neck and drew her closer. Their mouths met. The kiss was firm, deep, unrestrained. His tongue entered without asking, confident, deliberate. She let out a low sound against his mouth, something raw, caught between pain and hunger. Zarir bit her lower lip, then soothed it with his tongue, his hands tightening at her waist. She pressed against him instinctively, as if her body had already made its choice. When he pulled back just enough to breathe, their foreheads still touching, both of them trembling, she whispered only one word: "Stay." The room was dim, the afternoon light dying through narrow slits in the window. Ayla undressed slowly, her hands unsteady but her movements intentional. There was no romance in it, no music, no softness, only breath and truth. Zarir watched her like a man asking permission with his eyes. He didn't touch her yet. She removed the last piece of clothing without shame, only surrender. He approached, tracing her collarbones, her neck, the center of her chest, his touch controlled, experienced. When she stiffened slightly, he stopped immediately. "It's okay," he murmured. She nodded, her eyes bright, not with pleasure yet, but with fear. He lay over her carefully, positioning himself between her legs, his weight controlled, his breathing heavy. She inhaled sharply. "I've never," she began, her voice breaking. "I know," he whispered. He entered her slowly, deeply, with care. Ayla cried out softly, gripping the sheets, pain blooming, but she did not pull away. He stayed still, letting her feel everything, letting her body accept what was happening. He kissed her neck, her mouth grounding her. When he finally began to move, it was slow at first, then firmer. The pain remained, but it was hers. Chosen. His hand slid up her back, gripping her hair, hunger replacing restraint. She gasped, not in fear, but in something new. She opened her eyes. Zarir was looking at her as if seeing her for the first time. "I'm yours," she said, breathless. "No," he replied hoarsely. "You are my choice." Her body shattered beneath him, trembling, crying without knowing why, until everything inside her screamed one undeniable truth: "I am alive." Later, silence returned. Their bodies lay tangled, breaths slowing. Ayla rested against his chest, eyes closed, lighter than she had ever felt. But the world outside did not sleep. The days that followed passed as if the outside world no longer existed. The house seemed to breathe with them. The garden, the bedroom, the quiet verandas. They came together almost daily, not out of excess, but necessity. Zarir woke before her, studying her face as she slept. Ayla waited for him at dusk, calmer, warmer. They spoke little. They touched constantly. But beyond those walls, everything was watched. Whispers followed her through the corridors. His brothers returned to the old palace. Eyes lingered. They're together. It won't last. She's protecting what she inherited. Zarir pretended not to hear. Ayla heard everything. Then her body began to change. First the nausea, then the exhaustion, then the delay. She counted the days, then counted again. Sitting on the bed, hands over her stomach, she accepted what she already knew, but could not yet say aloud. She didn't tell him. She couldn't. The clause of the contract haunted her mind like a silent sentence. If the widow becomes pregnant within 1 year of the husband's death, she forfeits the inheritance, unless the child is legally recognized by the deceased. But Tariq was dead, and Ayla had never been touched by him. If anyone discovered the truth, if anyone tested her, she would lose everything, not just the fortune, but her safety, her place, her story, and maybe Zarir. One hot afternoon, Ayla noticed the blood. It was light, almost nothing, but enough to drain the color from her face. She locked herself in the bathroom, washed her face once, then twice, then a third time. When she finally lifted her eyes to the mirror, she already knew. She was pregnant, and it was not a blessing. It was a sentence with a deadline. That night on the terrace, Zarir wrapped his arms around her from behind. The air was thick, heavy with heat and unsaid words. "You're far away," he murmured. "Just tired," she replied. "With me, or with everything?" She didn't answer. He didn't press. He only held her tighter. But Ayla was holding something else inside her. A secret growing quietly, shifting, becoming impossible to hide. A secret that once revealed could destroy everything. The next morning, one of the oldest servants approached her. A Moroccan woman who had served Tariq for decades. She offered Ayla a cup of tea and leaned in close, her voice barely a breath. "If it's a boy," she whispered, "they will never let him inherit in peace." Ayla froze. In that moment, she understood something with painful clarity. She was completely alone. She tried to keep everything the same, the routine, the calm, the silences, but Zarir was watching. She barely ate in the mornings. When she did, she swallowed slowly, without appetite. She went to bed earlier. She woke with shadows under her eyes. The third time she ran from the garden to the bathroom with her hand over her mouth, he said nothing. But at night, when he held her from behind, he felt it. Her body was changing. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. But he knew every curve of her body the way one memorizes a prayer. And there was something new there, something growing. Ayla began avoiding mirrors. Zarir began avoiding questions. Until one humid morning she stood by the window in a thin nightgown. Zarir saw her from across the room and knew instantly. The fabric clung to her slender body, and at the center, a small but undeniable curve. Zarir entered silently. His eyes burned. He didn't look around. He went straight to her. Ayla stood near the window with a shawl around her shoulders. She didn't hear him approach, or pretended not to. His voice cut through the air. "How long were you going to hide this from me?" She froze. "When were you going to tell me, Ayla?" She turned slowly. Her face was pale. Her eyes were full. "I was going to tell you later," she said, "when it grew, when it was too late." "Too late for what?" he asked quietly. "I was afraid," she admitted. "Afraid of myself." He stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "Afraid of losing the inheritance?" She inhaled deeply, holding his gaze. She didn't answer right away. Zarir closed his eyes, ran a hand through his hair, turned as if to leave, then stopped. When he turned back, the anger had softened into something heavier. "You didn't lie to me," he said. "But you stayed silent, and that hurts too." Tears filled her eyes, but her voice was steady. "I didn't know how to tell you. By the time I understood, it was already too much." "Too much what?" "To lose everything. To lose you. To lose this place. This small piece." Zarir looked at her in silence. When he spoke again, his voice was controlled, raw. "I have no doubt that this child is mine. What hurts is knowing you went through all of this alone." She stepped closer, resting her forehead against his chest. "But I'm not alone anymore," she whispered. He wrapped his arms around her. In that moment, even with war brewing outside those walls, the silence between them felt like shelter. Zarir looked down at her belly. The curve was barely there, but it existed. "They will try to take this from you," he said softly. "From the baby." He placed his hand there, careful, reverent. "But they won't." From that day on, everything accelerated. The looks multiplied. Veiled questions turned into open accusations. Relatives began arriving without warning. Aunts spoke loudly, as if Ayla were deaf. "She looks pale. She's filling out. She's hiding something." One of the oldest lawyers sought out Zarir. "If this is confirmed, you understand the political weight of it," the man warned. Zarir answered only with his eyes, the look of someone who no longer owed explanations. That same afternoon, he called a meeting. The marble hall was cold, echoing. Uncles, cousins, brothers, lawyers, all seated in silence. Zarir entered alone, dressed in black. "Ayla is pregnant," he said. "The child is mine." No one spoke, and anyone who tries to harm her or this child will have to go through me. He scanned the room slowly. "You never accepted her existence. Now you will accept her permanence." He took a deep breath, the weight in his chest turning into resolve. "I defended my father's name," he added, "but I will not defend his mistakes." He turned and walked out. He knew the war had only begun. The house felt quieter than ever. That evening, Zarir found Ayla sitting on the terrace, barefoot, her eyes lost in the gray sky. He sat beside her without touching her. She broke the silence first. "You should hate me." "For what?" he asked. "For everything. For how this started. For how long I stayed silent." He exhaled slowly. "I hated the world for giving you so little," he said. "And I hated my father for thinking he could buy you." She turned toward him, surprised, but his gaze held no cruelty. "I don't want you out of pity," he continued. "Not because of the child. Not for honor." She met his eyes. "Then why?" Zarir smiled, a rare smile, one meant only for her. "Because now I choose you, with or without fortune, with or without a name." Her throat tightened, but she didn't cry. "I'm not the girl who arrived here afraid," she said. "Not the widow the world tried to bury under his name, not property, not scandal." She placed her hand over her belly, then over his. "I am mine," she said softly, "and still, I choose you." Zarir rested his forehead against hers. "Then stay," he whispered, "but only if it's for you, not for me, not out of fear." That night, there were no promises, no rings, no solemn words. Only the two of them lying side by side, hands intertwined, the world locked outside. For the first time, Ayla didn't feel the need to resist. She was exactly where she had chosen to be. At sunrise, they arrived at a small village on the southern coast of Spain. No bodyguards, no witnesses, no family. The house was white, with blue windows and a veranda facing the sea. 2 bedrooms, an open kitchen, a small yard filled with lavender. It was simple, and for Ayla, it was enough. For the first time in her life, it was enough. The wedding took place right there, in the small backyard, under the open sky. A local judge, called quietly through one of Zarir's friends, conducted the ceremony. There was no wedding dress. Ayla wore a light-colored tunic that moved with the breeze. Zarir wore a white shirt and linen trousers. It was the simplest wedding anyone could imagine, and yet, for Ayla, it was the truest one she had ever dreamed of. When the judge finished the ceremony, Zarir stepped closer in silence. He kissed her forehead first, not with possession, but with reverence. Then he kissed her lips, gently, firmly, as if sealing something sacred. Their hands met calmly. The yes was spoken without urgency. Their eyes said everything the silence no longer needed to hide. The legal process that followed was slow, quiet, relentless. Zarir's family filed a lawsuit to challenge the will, attempting to annul the part of the inheritance left to Ayla. They used the pregnancy as an argument, invoking the clause that stated she would lose her rights if she conceived within 1 year of Tariq's death. Ayla did not fight. Instead, she chose to let go. She signed a voluntary document relinquishing most of the assets tied to Tariq's name. She kept only a small property in the south of France, the old vineyard that no one else wanted to dispute, the last remaining piece of her family's history, enough to live quietly, far away, simply and free. Zarir claimed only what was legally his. He refused to touch anything that belonged to her. "We're not here to repeat what was done before," he said. "We're here to do something different." And that is exactly what they did. In their new home, Ayla woke up early. She drank tea on the veranda, felt the cold ceramic beneath her feet, listened to the sea, and remembered who she had been, only to never return to that place again. Zarir prepared coffee in the kitchen. Before any words, he rested his hands on her belly. Then he kissed her slowly, truthfully. The baby grew in silence, without noise, without pressure, without fear. One evening, without hurry, he entered the bedroom and found her sitting on the bed, her hair loose, her eyes calm, a serene smile on her lips. She waited for him in silence. When he came closer, she spoke. "That night," she said softly, "the one that was supposed to be my first, it was a nightmare, fear, silence, pain. It wasn't love. It wasn't surrender. It wasn't mine." Zarir sat beside her, took her hands, and answered without hesitation. "Then let this be your first, the only one that matters. Ours." She felt it before he kissed her. The kiss came warm, deep, real. His mouth found hers like someone returning home, with desire, with hunger, with reverence. They lay down slowly, no rituals, no ghosts, no fear. They made love for the first time without the past, without debt, without shame. When Ayla, breathless, rested against his chest, Zarir placed his hand over her belly and whispered, "Now you are my wife, the mother of my child, and the love of my life." She smiled, a full, free smile, and answered, "Now I am yours, for the first time, by choice." Their story did not begin like a fairy tale. It was built from restarts, from scars transformed into strength, from silence that became shelter, from everything only love can heal. If this story moved you, like the video, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell here on Stories of Love and Romance. We believe that every pain deserves a new beginning, and every beginning deserves to be told. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. I'll see you in the next video. And remember, some stories begin with pain, but end up saving our lives. If you made it this far, thank you for staying. Subscribe to the channel. We have a goal to reach, and you are part of it. Leave a like as a way to support this story. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching this video from? I'm sending you a warm hug, and I'll see you in the next story.